I'm just going to give a 2-minute warning. If everyone could find their seat, and then we'll get the evening going. Thank you. All right. Good evening, Spruce Grove. We'd like to welcome you tonight to an informational event sponsored by Let's Talk Alberta. Let's Talk is an educational society where our goal is to do just what the name says, have a good talk. How many of you here tonight have never been to a meeting of this sort? Wow. That's fantastic. What an encouragement to see so many of you here. Before we get going, I'm just going to take care of the few housekeeping issues that we need to do. If you're looking for the washrooms, they're out the main exit door to your right. Emergency exits, both sides of me and to the back on my left and also on the right. If you haven't yet signed up at the table at the back, we'd encourage you to do so, just to leave your name, some contact info, so that if we're back in this area, we'd be able to let you know, send you a poster of any upcoming events. And we'd also love for you to volunteer with us. There are trifold brochures at the table at the back, at the sign-up table. Please take at least one for yourself and take more so that you can share them with your neighbors, your families, your friends. We have lawn signs at the back. They're available by donation. We also have merchandise tables at the back, and sometimes it's hard to get a conversation going. So I always like to say, why don't you just wear that conversation on you, and that opinion might just start up a little conversation with your neighbors. I'll tell you right now, they're overpriced. Yes, but there's a reason for that. As a society, we're fully dependent on the donations we receive, the profit that we make from the merchandise, and this is what keeps us going. This event will probably sponsor the next event and the next one. And so it's important that we get these meetings and that we are able to spread them across the province of Alberta so that people can learn a lot about the issues, that you can get educated so that when the referendum comes in October, you'll be able to make an informed decision on the ballot. We're not funded by the government. We're not funded by large corporations, unions, or wealthy donors. The lion's share of our funding comes from people like you and me. We use this money carefully. We use it to pay for the rentals. We use it to pay for the gas for our speakers, but I guarantee you that even if we didn't pay the gas for our speakers, every one of them would be here tonight because they have a purpose, a passion, and a goal, and a love for Alberta that money can't buy. Well, that's pretty exciting. I've never been given an applause before. Thank you. So at an event like this, LTA, Let's Talk Alberta, what we're doing is providing a place, a safe environment for people to come and talk about the issues that are facing our province. You'd have to be under a rock to not know that there's a lot of things going on, and this is a place where we not only want to speak to you, but we want you to speak back to us. And so after the speakers have had their time to present, we're going to have a short break. Then we will open up a question and answer time where we invite you all to please come, share your comments, share your questions, your fears. You might have I don't know, some issue that you would like clarified. Please come. We'll have a mic available for you. For those of you who feel uncomfortable about doing something like that and standing at a mic, come and see me at the back. We'll write down your question and I can ask it for you. Okay, so having said all that, the three pillars that undergird our goals, our values, our faith, family, and freedom. We traditionally always either open our meetings in prayer or we close them. Usually ask one of our speakers to come and pray, and so Michael, I'm going to ask you, because you're our first speaker, would you mind opening us in prayer? Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just pray then. Okay, I'll pray for the meeting. Father in heaven, we thank thee for this day and this opportunity to get together to talk about important issues facing our province. We do pray that thou be here with us by thy Spirit. Help us, enlighten our minds. Help us to be able to listen to others and to hear what they have to say and to be able to address their concerns. We do pray for thy blessing upon this meeting this evening. Give us all safety and returning home afterwards, and we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Don't go far. Okay. So Michael is our first speaker tonight, and Michael is the author of books. He holds a PhD in political with his lovely wife and children. And what I like about Michael's books is that although they are academic and scholarly, they're meant for people just like you and me. And Your writing reflects that because I can understand it. So, they contain wonderful, fact-based historical perspectives on many subjects, including the moral decline of Canada. There's a book titled back there that is wonderful, and it's We've Left God Behind. So please visit the book table during our short intermission. So not only is Michael a great historian and a writer, he's a fantastic speaker, and it's my privilege to welcome him to the podium.
Thank you for that very kind introduction. So my talk tonight is called Canada Cannot Be Fixed. It's Time for Alberta Independence. So the case for Alberta independence can best be understood by looking at our province's history. For generations, Albertans have felt they've been ignored or even exploited within Canada, and eventually this feeling has reached the point now where many believe that the only solution is to become an independent country. Now, what is known as the Prairie West was originally part of Rupert's Land, with the vast territory of the Hudson's Bay Company. In 1870, Rupert's Land was purchased by Canada, and the inhabitants of the territory were annexed to Canada without being consulted. Some people had other ideas about the best political future for their community, and unhappiness about being annexed and forced into Canada contributed to the Riel Rebellion of 1870. In other words, there was evidence of Western discontent with Canada right from the very beginning. Then the prairies were filled with settlers to pioneer the land and create an agricultural economy. There was a protective tariff to ensure that Western farmers had to buy their manufactured goods and equipment from central Canada. That meant the farmers had to pay more prices. That meant the farmers had to pay higher prices than they would have otherwise. Also, they had to sell men who took a share of the final price that was gained on the world market, and they had to pay the transportation costs. So the farmers were paying more for their equipment from central Canada, and they had to pay for the transportation costs, and they had to pay middlemen for the distribution of their grain. So they ended up paying more and receiving less than they should have. So these kinds of grievances kept many Westerners unhappy about their place within Canada, and that led to political action to address these concerns, but they were not angry enough to create any kind of movement towards independence at that time. Instead, many Westerners, and especially Albertans, turned away from the mainstream parties and created alternative parties. So we ended up having United Farmers of Alberta, for instance, in the 1920s and into the 1930s. And federally, we had the Progressive Party of Canada for the federal party in Alberta. So we turned away from the mainstream Eastern parties and created our own parties as a way of resisting central Canadian control. But even more profound than those parties was the election in 1935 of the Social Credit Government in Alberta, an event that set this province apart from every other province in Canada. Now, if you remember Alberta Report magazine, Ted Byfield, who founded the Alberta Report magazine, this is what he wrote about the 1935 election of social credit. He said this: "While other provinces whined about the Depression, Alberta acted. We would not acquiesce in the misery we felt and saw around us. We would fight. We would rebel. If anything is characteristic of this province, it's that spirit of defiance. Push us far enough and we will strike back. That was our record and that is our reputation." So in short, during the first few decades of the 20th century, Alberta fought back against central Canada, but not through movements favoring independence. They wanted to stay within Canada. Now that all changed when Pierre Trudeau became Prime Minister in 1968. With Pierre Trudeau as Prime Minister, a threshold was crossed, and many Westerners for the very first time started to consider independence. So the very first book written on Western independence was written in 1971. It was called The Unfinished Revolt, Some Views on Western Independence, and it was a collection of essays. And the main essay was contributed by John Barr, who was actually the executive assistant to Alberta's Minister of Education at that time. And his idea was, we first need to try and reform Canada, and if we can't reform Canada, then we have to move towards independence. So he wrote that in 1971. That's like 55 years ago. That idea of trying to reform Canada before we move towards independence, that idea has been around publicly for 55 years. It was a great idea in 1971. Now, 2 years later, in 1973, there was a war in the Middle East in October of 1973, and that caused the price of oil to skyrocket. So now Alberta could really finally cash in on our oil resources. But there were the rewards we got from that oil was not as good as it should have been, because Pierre Trudeau did two things to prevent us from benefiting from the oil as we ought to have. For one thing, he kept the price of oil within Canada artificially low. He created a Canadian price on oil that was much lower than the world price. So our Alberta's oil sold within Canada did not receive the world price. He also put an export tax on oil to the United States, because we were already exporting oil to the United States. So this is the first time in Canadian history something was done like this. So Alberta would sell its oil to the United States, and the federal government would take a huge percentage of that oil revenue, even though it belonged to Alberta, because it was Alberta's resource. Now, after the Progressive Conservative Party government in 1979, there was a federal election in February of 1980, and this election was unique because of a conscious decision by the Liberal Party to exploit regional divisions to win power. Now, the Liberal Party's election campaign theme that year was summarized by Keith Davey as "Screw the West, we'll take the rest." So the Liberals campaigned against Alberta and against the West to win seats in central Canada. Now, after getting power in October of 1980, Trudeau's government brought in the National Energy Program, which was designed to increase federal control dramatically over Alberta's energy resources, and it devastated Alberta. The National Energy Program devastated Alberta. You probably know that yourselves, and I've talked to people last year who told me they knew of people who committed suicide because of the economic devastation of the National Energy Program. Now, Trudeau's anti-Alberta policies permanently changed Alberta's political culture, because before 1980, when they did surveys on support for Alberta, the survey results in favor would be single-digit favor, 6 or 7%. But since 1980 onwards, whenever they do a survey in support of Alberta independence, it's always been double digit. Like maybe in those early years, it might have been 16 or 17%, then would go up to 20%, and now it's around 30% or something. So Pierre Trudeau permanently changed our political culture by attacking our province. Now, despite the support for independence, the growing support for independence, even in the early 1980s, there are still many people who thought we should try and reform Canada first. And one of those people was Senator Ernest Manning. He had been our longest-serving premier. Then he ended up in the Senate. In 1981, he co-wrote a book entitled Regional Representation, the Canadian Partnership. It was the first major proposal for Senate reform. And they were arguing in that book that we needed to change our national institutions so the voice of the West could be heard within Ottawa. If we could change our national institutions so our voice could be heard within Ottawa, there'd be no need for us to get out of Canada because our voice could be heard there. Now, in 1984, Trudeau was replaced by later. Brian Mulroney was elected as Prime Minister for the Progressive Conservatives. Now, this was good news for Alberta because every member of Parliament from Alberta was with his government. Like, the people in the West voted for Mulroney, so our people were in power now in Ottawa, and we thought things were going to turn out well for us. But it didn't turn out well for us because Mulroney was still in favor of Central Canada over Alberta and over the West, and we saw this clearly in the CF-18 fighter jet issue. Like, Canada had recently CF-18 fighter jets, and they needed to be maintained. It was a very large government contract to maintain those CF-18 fighters. There's only 2 cities in Canada that could do it, Winnipeg and Montreal. So the government held a competition to see which of the cities could best do that, and Winnipeg, the company in Winnipeg, won the contract according to the government's criteria. Winnipeg won, and Mulroney awarded the contract to Montreal. So that just showed how clearly the federal government was biased towards Eastern Canada. So that angered Westerners very much, and it triggered the creation of the Reform Party of Canada in 1987. Of course, the Reform Party was led by Preston Manning, and the slogan of the Reform Party at that time was "The West wants in." Our voice is not being heard in Ottawa. We want to send MPs to Ottawa who will speak for us and represent us in Ottawa. The West wants in. Now, a brochure created by the early Reform Party was called "A New Federal Political Party to Represent the West," and this particular brochure was created in 1987, so that's 39 years ago, and this is what it said. Throughout our history, Ontario and Quebec have held a lion's share of political influence in Canada, and they continue to dominate the national scene at the expense of the West. Our political and economic development is being hamstrung by the vested interests of the Golden Triangle establishment of Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal. So that was written 39 years ago, those words, and nothing has changed. You can write those exact same words today. Nothing has changed. 39 years. So the Reform Party won many seats in Western Canada and especially in Alberta throughout the 1990s. But over time, the leaders of the Reform Party wanted it to expand to become a national party. So it became the Canadian Alliance in the year 2000. Kind of not focusing on Western issues anymore because they wanted to focus on national issues to win the election and beat the Liberals. And then in 2003, the Canadian Alliance merged with the Progressive Conservative Party of Canada to form the Conservative Party of Canada that we currently have. And they elected Stephen Harper as the leader, who of course became Prime Minister in 2006. So Stephen Harper had been a member of Parliament for the Reform Party originally, and now he was a Conservative Party Prime Minister from Calgary. And so for the most part, Westerners trusted Stephen Harper because he was from the West, he was from Alberta, and he knew our concerns, and so we trusted him. We could rely on him for the most part. But then in 2015, Justin Trudeau became Prime Minister. And of course, Justin Trudeau's main priority was to fight climate change by choking Alberta's oil industry. So as you know, he brought in many policies that were harmful for Alberta. You know, the No More Pipelines bill, the Alberta tanker ban, and the carbon tax, and all these different things. Because even though the Constitution of Canada gives control and the ownership and control of resources to the provinces, Trudeau knew that by implementing some of these policies, he could kind of incrementally overcome the constitutional protection of Alberta's resources and prevent us from developing our resources as we should be able to do. Now, even though they were trying to shut down, our oil industry, they were still reaping billions of dollars each year from Alberta's oil industry. And a University of Calgary economist named Robert Manzel, he calculated that from 1965 until 2018, Alberta made a net contribution to Canada of $630 billion from 1965 to 2018. Now, we've contributed many more billions since 2018, so it's probably $700 billion or more. So during the last several decades, there have been many proposals by various people, serious people, about how to improve Alberta's situation within Canada. I mentioned John Barr in 1971, Ernest Manning and his colleagues were proposing Senate reform in 1981, and there were others, and none of these recommendations were implemented. But most significant was the Reform Party of Canada. Alberta voted overwhelmingly for the Reform Party during the 1990s, but Canada's political system could not be fixed. That's the bottom line. If Preston Manning and the Reform Party could not get a Triple E Senate and otherwise reform Canada's political system, then it can't be done. The West has tried to fix Canada, but it does not want to be fixed. Therefore, the only remaining alternative is to get out. There's no other option. Thank you. Sorry, I'm supposed to introduce the next speaker. So the next speaker is Ben Trudeau, my friend. I've got to know him this year. Of course, he always mentions distantly he's related to some other Trudeaus that everybody knows of, but he's got considerable political experience in Quebec. He might be the most experienced political person in our movement, and he has much his knowledge and perspective. So please welcome my friend Ben Trudeau.
Thank you. Yes. I'd like to say, yes, I'm related 14 generation back in 1938. This is where we meet. I was born and raised in Montreal, moved to Alberta 20 years ago. I started in politics at 14 years old. My dad was a PR guy, wrote 6 of the 12 white books filed by the PQ in 1970. I grew up life in politics. It's politics that brought me to Alberta. I was working for Canada Economic Development for the region of Quebec under the first Harper government in 2006, and I came to meet Premier of Alberta, Mr. Stelmach, in April 2nd, 2007, and I moved short after. So resigned from the minister's office and moved. So. And I met my wife here in 2011. I was bachelor, like a lot of young men in politics. You don't get married; it's too busy. So I got 39 years old with a girl born and raised in Edmonton. We have 4 kids, all born at the Greyhounds Hospital in Edmonton, and I now live in Silver Lake. So I was never Canadian. I was a Quebecer. So now I'm Albertan. At the same time, yeah, thank you. But at the same time, I'm not a separatist. I've never been. In Quebec, I was very involved in it's my fourth constitutional campaign of my life. The first one, I was 8 years old, so I was dragged by my dad and all kind of stuff. But after that, I campaigned for the no of Charlottetown in 1990. Then I was very involved in the 95 referendum in Quebec. In fact, the question that was asked to the Quebec population first written on my computer after a meeting, so I don't have a lot of time, so it's a long story. When I saw what was happening here, I decided I need to see what Quebec is doing, what Quebec has done to be sovereign under our constitution. That Alberta is requesting a stuff and says that they cannot get these stuff because of the federal, which is not true, not totally true. If we get some provincial politician with courage, we can wreck this country the way we want. And I'm using my word the right way here. Quebec, know what? So Canada, we tend to start in Plain of Abraham in 1759, but when the French were there for already 225 years, and then they start seizing the land that owned by the French. Well, there was a civil war in 1837. ended up with the hanging of the 12 French general and sending 100 others in Australia. Over 500 people were killed. The revolt was tamed, which then came to a peace treaty in 1867, which we call Canada. and since then, Quebec always the English decided, well, we cannot fight them, so we'll crush them. So by 1900. If you were living in Montreal, in Griffintown, and you were French-Canadian, your life expectancy was 19 years old. You couldn't get a loan from a Canadian bank if you were French. So what the French did, they started their own bank. It's called Desjardins. Probably a lot of you have insurance from them today. It's the largest credit union in Canada. Out of the 9 million Quebecers, 7.8 million are members of Desjardins, have accounts at Desjardins, because Quebecers believe in themselves and believe that, you know what, we're being crushed, so we could do our own stuff our own way. 1954, the federal decided not to remove the income tax that was started in 1917 for the war measure, so Duplessis, the Premier of Quebec, said, well, according to our constitution, it's province that can collect taxes, not the feds. So they start collecting their own taxes. And the feds fought for them for 3 years, which end up on the equalization program. The equalization program was created to take money from Quebec, because Quebec was collecting their own taxes. Then in 1965, the Fed said, okay, we're going to have a Canadian pension plan. Quebec says, no, we don't. You won't collect our money. That's not true. We don't trust you. We'll collect our own money. So Quebec started their own pension plan. 60 years later, La Caisse, it's named Caisse de dépôt, the Caisse has 500 billion of asset for 6 million insured. The Canadian pension plan has 700 billion of assets for 22 million insured. So the Caisse de dépôt is 3 times more performant than the federal stuff. And here in Alberta, La Caisse, the pension plan of Quebec, owns more real estate than the government of Alberta. They own the outlet at the airport. They own Southgate Mall. They own a couple of malls here. They own the Cross Island Mill in Calgary. They own a couple of towers. Why? Because when they created that, one obligation that they had was to keep the money in Quebec and in Canada. So Quebec has learned to take their sovereignty according to the Constitution. And this is what I wrote in that book. In that book, I write, how did Quebec become sovereign within Canada? Today, Quebec has 38 embassies around the world. They're called Maison du Québec. So when you're in Paris, London, Tokyo, Singapore, you don't go to the Canadian embassy when you're Quebecer. You go to the Quebec Embassy. Quebec has 2 seats at the UN, not under Canada, under Quebec directly. Why? Because they know how to use that tool called our Constitution. Not because there are more, and we have the same tools. If any states in the United States would have, that they would dream to have the same right that we have under our federal Constitution. So my call in all of that is that if Alberta just start doing what Quebec does, the country won't be able to function anymore. So that book speaks of that in general sense. And then during this tour, which has been doing since March with Chris and the gang, I saw there was specific questions. So what I've done, I wrote a book on equalization. How can we shield ourselves? Quebec received 3.5 billion of equalization more than they should, because they know how to shield themselves from the calculation. This is how we do the same. Then the Canada Pension Plan. Quebec, again, 3 times more performant. This is how we do the same. Canada Revenue Agency. No, the Premier will tell you on the fly that it doesn't make sense. It's going to cost $1 billion to put up and about $500 million to run per year. Well, do you know that in Alberta, if you're a big corporation, you have 72 hours to remit your portion of your tax, and the federal has 24 months to bring it back at the rhythm they want. So right now, with the Alberta cash flow, the federal is doing $600 million a year just in interest. So if we would manage just our cash flow, that billion to put it up, and that 500 million to run it, the ROI is about 36 months for us to go back on our money. And then not only do we control our money, but we control the way it goes to Ottawa. The last one is paycheck politics. As I was doing my research, I found, basically I took care of we always say we leave 30 billion more to the feds than what we should. Well, how do we leave that? So I did the research, and there's 8 categories of stuff where we leave that 30 billion, and I wrote these 4 little books to go against that. And we can do that without a referendum, just by voting at the legislature here. That's all. You know what? We collect in royalties about 400 billion a week on every Friday afternoon. It goes to CIBC in Toronto. How come? The account of the province is at RBC. Meanwhile, we are the only province that has an institution named ATB. Nobody wants to use it because there's scandals in there. There's way to manage that. But ATB is the Alberta Treasury Fund, and we don't even keep our money there. This is a scandal. This is in Quebec. It will never fly. So I'm here to tell you that beyond separation, there is a solution, but for that we will need a change of a political culture. And I don't know if it's possible. My dream is that it is. And well, that's what I have to tell you tonight. All my books are on the back table. They can be bought independently or all together. We can speak to Bara. She has all the details on that. And so the next speaker it became a friend as well. Where is he? Oh, you're right. It's funny because I was looking at his wife because she showed me the time, but I wasn't looking. You see? I just have eyes for your wife. You should be careful. So John Riel, he's a lot of experience in politics in Alberta. He used to be the leader of the Alberta First Party 20 years ago in another life. I don't know. Yeah. 30 years ago, and became a good friend, very, very good speaker. He knows what he's talking about, and he only have 8 minutes like me.
Thank you so much, Ben. You know, I like this man. I really like this man. He's an Albertan through and through. Somebody asked him once if he'd go back to Quebec, and he said, no, my home is Alberta. I think that's great. Now, thanks so much, Ben. What a great job. He does a great job every time. You know, I've heard a lot. I listened to the first talk, I listened to Ben, and I listened to a lot of talk about history and what's happened. And I could do the same thing. I could sit here and tell you about my experience in politics 25 years ago, where we created the political party called Alberta First, where our sole objective was to have the federal government and the provincial governments obey the Constitution. Didn't work then. Does that sound familiar? Does it sound a lot like a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada? Didn't work 30 years ago. It's not going to work today. There's a lot of stuff I can talk about economically, and I'm not going to. I'm not going to talk about economic history because we all know it. For example, the idea during the Depression. Do you know why Alberta defaulted during the Depression? Because our send the grain down east, and they had to pay the freight to get it there. Then they weren't paid for the grain. Canada stole the grain from them. Talks about representation. The Reform mentioned wanting in. They want an equal elected and equal Senate do a different thing. We have 24 senators, and the East has 81. So even if it was elected, it doesn't make any difference. How about we live in a representation by population country, right? We are governed by population. Wherever you go, your representation is determined by how many people live there. Is that correct? Do you know that? How about people per MP in Alberta? 125,000. For every 125,000 people, we have one MP. Atlantic Canada, They have one MP for every 38,000. So the Atlantic vote is 3 times more powerful than yours. In the last election, at 8:11 at night, as the polls closed in Alberta, the election was called in favor of a Liberal minority government. Before a single vote was counted west of the Ontario-Manitoba border, the election was called. Now, I'm not saying this because it's unfair. We all know it's unfair. I'm saying this because your vote doesn't count. So every time you come across somebody who says, we need to stay in Canada, we need to negotiate with Canada, we have leverage, we can work a better deal. I'll tell you that that Louis Riel, during his trial, he was addressing the jury during his trial, and he said at that time that the ministers in the government of Canada paid no attention to the Northwest Territories. They didn't care. And not only that, the Council of the Territories didn't care either. They suffered from the same disease. Nothing has changed. So I'm going to say that we don't have much time because we have to be out of here on the dot tonight. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things that I think we need to do to change things. I love Canada. I served in the RCAF. I enlisted in 1965. Darn, I am old. Wow. I also served as a commissioned member of the Canadian Army and the Signals Corps. So don't accuse me of not caring about Canada. I care a lot about Canada, and I want to save Canada. So let me tell you how to do it really quickly. There are 10 provinces in Canada. 7 of those provinces collect equalization. The maritime provinces collect around 20 to 25% of their budgets, their annual budgets, from equalization. Quebec does better. They only get 8.7% of their budget from equalization. Did you know that Manitoba gets, $8 billion in equalization? The only 3 provinces that don't are Alberta, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia. Do you think we'll ever change the equalization formula because it's in the Constitution? When 8 provinces collect? By the way, the $8.7 billion that Quebec gets, or the 8.7% that they get, is just under $14 billion a year. It won't change. So I kind of regard Canada as the brother-in-law in the basement that we've been looking after for the last 5 or 6 years, who just cleaned out the fridge and hasn't contributed a penny in household expenses. We throw them out. So my solution to save Canada is we leave. Make any sense? We leave. If we leave, all of those provinces that rely on the $20 to $40 billion extra a year we pay in taxes and see nothing in return for, they'll have to stand on their own 2 feet. If they have to stand on their own 2 feet, good. And we'll help them by doing trade with them, by offering employment opportunities, but not by giving them our money. Just like the brother-in-law in the basement. Now, how many of you folks want a sovereign Alberta? Let's see a show of hands. I would say that's close to 100%. How many want to remain in Canada? Oh, good. There's 5, 6, there's probably 8 or 10 of you. I'm hoping that those of you who want to remain in Canada ask us some difficult questions when we have our little chat afterwards, so we can talk, because that's what this is all about. Let's talk. But talk about some of the people who are intransigent when it comes to conversation. And I want to tell you a little story. How much time do I have? A minute and a half. Are you ready? I'm going to talk real fast. No, there was a donkey and a tiger in the jungle, and the donkey said, "Grass is blue." And the tiger said, No, you idiot. Grass is green. Well, they argued until finally it escalated to the point where they almost came to blows, and the tiger said, well, let's go talk to the king being the king of the jungle, the lion, and we'll ask him. So they went to the king of the jungle, and the donkey said, this idiot thinks the grass is green, and I know the grass is blue. And the king of the jungle said, well, if you know the grass is blue, then it's blue. And the donkey got really tickled with himself. Great, I know that I was right. I knew I was right. And off he pranced. And as he pranced away, the tiger said to the lion, he said, "Wait a minute. You and I both know the grass is green." He said, "Yes. But when somebody is so convinced of something that nothing in the way of fact or debate will convince them, then there's no point in arguing with them." And the donkey then said, "Well, I think that the tiger should be punished." And the lion said, "Okay, tiger, you are punished with 5 years of silence." "Why?" "Because you're an intelligent being, and you wasted your time speaking with somebody who is an idiot." Sound familiar? So my plea to you is, when you come across Forever Canada people, some of them will want to talk to you reasonably and will listen to the information that you provide as you listen to the information they provide. However, don't be an idiot. If they are unconvincible, if they know what is absolutely wrong is absolutely right, tell them, "Yep, I agree," and walk away. We have the opportunity, I think that we need to be very sure that when the next provincial election comes around, we have the opportunity to elect people in Alberta who are 100% for Alberta, whether they're premier or whether they're sitting in the legislature. Make sure that whoever you vote for, whoever you select for your riding, is for Alberta and Alberta only. We elect politicians to send to Ottawa. Let them worry about Canada. Right now we have a government in Edmonton that is more concerned with their relationship with Canada than they are with their concern for the people of Alberta. We need people in our government in Alberta who are for Alberta and Albertans. Make sure that when you select those people the next time around, you choose wisely. Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, tell them what's what. Don't be an idiot. Thank you so much. You're very fortunate tonight. Christopher Scott of the Whistle Stop Cafe is a man who's braved a lot of controversy and a lot of difficulty to get where he is today. He's a dyed-in-the-wool Albertan. Like me, he was born in British Columbia, but he's an Albertan, like I am. He is a man of great faith and character, and you're going to enjoy listening to him. And I hope that he, like I, will be more focused on the future and what we need to do rather than the past. We know we've been abused. It's time for us to move forward, and Chris is going to show us the way. Chris Scott.
Well, that's a heavy burden to put on me, John. Thank you. I don't know about showing you the way, but I'm certainly happy to share my opinions with you and my outlook for what Alberta could be, for what Alberta should be, in my opinion. So I'll start point blank. My opinion is that Alberta independence is not only necessary, but it is inevitable. And that's what I want to talk to you about. I've been in this space, kind of this advocacy space, for not very long. I'm going to be 47 in just a few days, September 7th, so you have a few shopping days left. Wink, wink. I'm going to be 47 years old, and until I was 41, I guess. Has it been that long? Is it really 2026? I guess, yeah. I was completely politically apathetic. I never got involved. I voted, I bitched about elections, mostly about Alberta being underrepresented, our voices never being heard, but I never did anything about it. And then I ended up in a situation where I kind of was forced to either learn or, and financial death, whatever kind of, it was either learn or come. So I started learning. I started learning because I was staring down the barrel of the government. They were coming. I disagreed with in 2020 and 2021, and I stood up for myself. And then I found myself standing up for other people, and I couldn't stop. So the government came for me, and it forced me to learn who I was. And then it forced me to learn what Canada is, and it forced me to learn about the Constitution. How many people in the room have ever read the Constitution? Not very many people put their hand. And if you consider that the Constitution is the supreme law of Canada, it's what governs us, I think it's important that we know it. How many people in this room have read a piece of legislation? More people have read a piece of legislation than read the Constitution. I read, the first piece of legislation I ever read was the Alberta Public Health Act. Because the government tried to do something to me and to others, saying that it was allowed to be done because it was in the Public Health Act, so I had to learn it. And as you start learning these things, well, something becomes clear. As I went through this journey, it became about my struggles and my trials and tribulations with the government, more about the overarching systemic issue that Alberta faces within Confederation. Now, we've all felt it. We've all kind of seen symptoms of it. Some of us, if any of you in this room work in energy, you probably have felt it in the last 20 years. But the issues that I faced as a citizen in Alberta they actually pale in comparison to what Alberta faces in Confederation. Now, that might seem like a very bold claim, but it's true. And if you bother to learn about these things, start reading and figuring out why is it that Alberta has to beg to apply for a pipeline? Why is it that Alberta needs to have an independence movement, a movement of people who want to withdraw from Canada before Ottawa starts listening? And not even really listening, but just listening enough, giving a little bit of crumbs so the chickens that have been beat to crap over the last few years. Why is that? Is it fair that Alberta has to beg and get on its knees to get major projects built within Confederation? It's supposed to be a group of people working together for common cause, for common goal. I would argue, though, that Canada's goal has changed in the last 20 years. And believe it or not, I think it started under a Conservative government. So where Canada is going, Alberta, our values have diverged. And our values changed when our country started talking about Alberta as the dirty, embarrassing cousin, because we're destroying the planet. Well, we know we're not destroying the planet. Anybody in Alberta knows that we provide a service to the world by powering things. Anybody that's ever worked in energy in Alberta knows that we do it ethically and responsibly, and we care about the environment. You know that. But our country was talking about us differently. And then when we spoke up about it, we were called just the own provincial government. Embarrassing cousins, you're whining. Just face Alberta. And then you have to ask yourself, what is Alberta's place? What is our place as a province within Confederation? And if you rewind to just before Alberta was legislated into existence, without asking the people, without referendum, without plebiscite, without First Nations consult, by the way, an act of parliament. If you go back to before that, the cat was let out of the bag about 2 years prior, when Clifford Sifton, the Minister of the Interior at the time, stood on the steps of the legislature in Winnipeg, and he said, "We desire, and every patriotic Canadian desires, that the great trade of the prairies go to build up our factories and workshops in the East and contribute to our prosperity in every conceivable way," or something like that. I get it a little bit wrong. But the idea is there. They wanted Alberta and Saskatchewan to become part of the Dominion of Canada, to become Federation, because we had stuff. And if you consider the history of Alberta and Saskatchewan, and actually British Columbia to some extent, in that time period between 1905 and specifically 1965, you would see that Clifford Sifton's words that he spoke back then came to fruition in the way Alberta and Saskatchewan were treated. John gives you some examples about inequitable things that Alberta and Saskatchewan had to face. We couldn't move things by rail interprovincially. That's not working together. That's not a united Canada. We can't even ship booze across a border. That's not working together. That's not a united Canada. Our farmers were forced to sell their grain that they worked hard for to the Canadian Wheat Board, and so they could take a cut, whereas the East didn't have to do that. There are so many examples across history of why Clifford Sifton's words were so true. When I started thinking about these things, when I started learning about them and reading what our Constitution was and where it came from, I came to this inevitable conclusion that just like many other nations across the planet, in 100 years, we went from 50 nations to 183. Since 1990, there's been 38 new nations formed. Much like many other nations, Alberta within Canada, we've diverged to the point where we need to start talking openly about what our future looks like. Is our future in Alberta a future where we have to beg Parliament to listen to us? Is our future within Alberta a future where our politicians placate us with referendums that never have any result? And we're distracted by hockey games and full bellies from a good restaurant on a Friday night? Is our future going to be the same as it was the last 20 years, where every election night here in Alberta, we're watching the TV with bated breath, hoping that there's more blue seats in the east? All of Western Canada is blue, and it's beautiful, just like my shirt. And then we watch as everything in the east turns red. And before our ballot boxes are even collected, and no, this has nothing to do with the time zone. Before our ballot boxes are even collected, we see on CBC, the election's been called, we have a minority Liberal government, which turns into a majority because our politicians don't give a crap about us, and they gaslight us to keep their position. Is this the future we want for Alberta? Where our children have to watch this, and our children know that it doesn't matter if my kids say, it doesn't matter if I go vote, Dad, because the election's called before my vote counted. Is that the future you want for your kids? It is not the future I want for my children. And I admire Ben's position that we can take control of things. And I agree, in a perfect world we could. What I see in politics in Canada is absolutely pathetic. Trying to get the majority of people to agree to change things and to pursue something like is like herding cats. Getting enough people into a room to talk about Alberta's future in advance of a question that's going to be asked to Alberta on our self-determination is difficult. Did you know that? Can you believe it? In Alberta, it's hard to get people to engage with a conversation about our future, even though it's being handed to us on a silver platter. Of those 38, do you know how many of them were done peacefully? 80%. Previous to that, it was people all over the world have had to sacrifice, and no, it's constitutionally binding, everything changes the next day question. But it's on ourselves. Exploring. That's worth talking about. That's worth setting aside our feelings. And I have a very strong attachment to Canada. And I still do, because it's Canada that allows me the opportunity to come up in front of you folks and share my opinions and express myself, even though I'm expressing my desire for us to leave. That means a lot to me. But we have to talk about this. And we have to stop allowing our politicians to tell us what to think. We have to stop allowing the media to tell you, no matter which side of the conversation that you're on, that you're less than someone else because you think differently. This is dangerous. And we have a moral obligation, not just to ourselves, but to our neighbors, even those that disagree with us, to be open and honest in our conversations, to talk about this, Alberta. We're being offered this question in October on a silver platter, and not one of you folks in this room has to bleed. Nobody has to die. Nobody has to go to war. Our government is going to ask us to express our will. And in the course of history, that is one of the rarest things that people get. One of the rarest. That's why Let's Talk Alberta exists. Because I want people who disagree with me to come to an event that we put on and tell me why I should change my mind. I've told you folks a little tip of the iceberg about why I believe Alberta needs to explore self-determination through independence. Now I want to hear you tell me why it's better for me and my family and their families that they will inevitably have to remain with the status quo? Why is it better to continue doing the same thing we've been doing for 121 years and haven't gotten real change? You may argue with me that we're seeing changes. Our premier's getting things done. We have pipeline deals. And those things are true, except if you peel away all the political hype and you ask yourself, what is it that Alberta is actually doing, and does it fix the systemic imbalance of Confederation? The answer is no. Albertans still have to beg. Albertans still have to stand up and be called whiners for not wanting to hemorrhage per year to all. And you might argue with me about the number. Fine. Say it's 15 billion. It's not. It's closer to 30. Is it fair that Alberta hemorrhages billions of dollars to Ottawa for which we don't get a penny back in services or transfers? And then we have to watch as our federal government uses that money for things that do not align with our values. I don't agree with that. I don't agree that your money should ever go to fund gender-affirming, mind-clearing operations in some Istan. I don't agree with that. I also don't believe, although I'm sympathetic to the people on both sides, I don't believe for 1 second that our government should be sending $50 billion to another country to fund their war as our veterans freeze to death on the streets. Now, these issues transcend the monetary things. It's not an annoyance of equalization, or I'm annoyed because I pay more taxes. I'm annoyed because we do those things and then we have no say, basically no say. We can elect a bunch of MPs, they'll go to Ottawa, they'll say things, Ottawa says, yeah, okay. We have a referendum here, 62.5% of Albertans say we want to change or end equalization. Our premier writes a strongly worded letter and the federal government says, yeah. I don't think that's right. I don't want that for my children. I want something different for my children. I want my children's vote and their voice to matter. I want the decisions that are made in Alberta to affect Alberta. I want Alberta to suffer the consequences of our electoral decisions if they're bad, and I want us to benefit from them when they're good, because what happens when the people that are making the rules suffer the consequences? The decisions get better. That's what I want. This is about it's about our voices mattering, really mattering for the first time in 121 years. I want something different. And I will debate anybody as to why we should continue with what we have right now. If you can convince me why the status quo is better, maybe my vote will change in October. Right now I know how I'm voting. I've told you. I believe Alberta independence is necessary and inevitable. That's my personal opinion. And when I go into that ballot box, and when I have that piece of paper in front of me, and I'm looking at that, and there's a question about our self-determination on there, I'm going to remember that I have an obligation to do this with a clear head, with knowledge, not on feelings because of what other people had to do so that I had the opportunity to do it. And I hope you think this, I hope you feel the same thing. I hope the weight of the question rests heavily on you to the point where you explore all of the details surrounding it, and you're willing to step out of your comfort zone, as I am, because I don't like crowds. And if we do this, and we talk about it as human beings, not as adversaries, because you may not agree with me on my opinion. I don't see you as an adversary. I see you as an ally that I haven't talked enough with yet. If we do that, when October comes and we vote and our voices as Albertans tell our government one way or another, we want this or we want that, we will have done our duty. And we will have the best outcome. We will have the best outcome if we talk about this. So, should I say let's talk Alberta? Oh man. I thought Shane was back there frantically trying to brush me off the stage, but he's standing back there with a very intimidating yellow bucket. Now, this intimidating yellow bucket is very similar to those little intimidating trays that they pass around at church, you know, and then you experience the peer pressure as your neighbor that you're sitting beside puts something in the bucket, but you don't really want to, but you do anyway because your neighbor did, and you know you want to beat the Jones. That's what's happening right now. And if you can, please consider supporting the work we're doing here. Our goal isn't to tell you what to think. We want to tell you what we think and give you the opportunity to challenge our ideas and opinions. Heck, you know what? Even if some people accept our invites, they'll come and speak at these things and tell you why the status quo is better. We just haven't had anyone accept that yet. But it costs money. It costs money to book the halls. It costs money to... What else does cost money? Everything. The flyers that we print. Everything. Yes. So whatever you guys and gals can give, that's great. And I'm just joking about the peer pressure. If you can't or you don't want to, don't feel compelled to do so. We will make it work. We always do. One of the things I want to mention, though, did anybody notice a piece of artwork in the parking lot as you came in? So I want to tell you how we did that on a shoestring budget. So I frequently make financial decisions that aren't conducive to my own future being better. One of those is buying this motorhome. And then I thought, you know what? If we're going to travel around in this thing, because we're all over Alberta, why don't we make it a rolling billboard for Let's Talk Alberta? The only reason we were able to do that is because there is a lady in Lacombe who cares so much about Alberta that she made a very sizable contribution to Let's Talk Alberta, which allowed us to do that bus. It allowed us to print, I think we're going to print 350,000 flyers. Did anybody receive a flyer? A Let's Talk Alberta flyer in the mail? Good, awesome. If you don't allow junk mail, you won't get our flyers. But these are the types of things we were able to do because this lady believed in the future of Alberta so much that she wanted to give us a leg up, and that's how it's done. It is grassroots. We don't get checks from the government. We don't get checks from Putin, although I am Russian. It's you folks that make it happen, so thank you very much. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and I don't want to go any longer than 10 minutes because we have to be out of here at a specific time tonight. Usually we just go until you stop at the questions, but today we really want to do everything we can to make sure that all your questions get addressed. So if you have a question, don't be shy. If you have a challenge for us, don't be shy. If you are shy and you want a question anyway, go see Sandy. She'll write it down, and she will ask your question. We don't want to leave anybody behind in this conversation, so please be bold. Thank you very much.
By the way, questions, guys, Jasper over there has the microphone over there, okay? We're going to ask all people who have questions to be on that side. Yeah. On the other side, on the left side, on this side, okay? We're going to ask all the people who have questions to be on that side, okay? Please do not interrupt when you're asking questions. Please do not interrupt when you're asking questions. I said it twice because it's important.
I'm going to sit on the far right.
I'm on the far left.
That's right. So
I would suggest letting Benoit have
okay,
one of the outside.
I'll sit. I'll be center left then.
Seems to be that you're slim enough.
So each one has a mic, and just don't hold the mics at the same time. And just argue at the same time. I see the camera, so I can give them the mic.
I think I only
You guys look awesome.
Well, now you're.
That's the first question.
The first question was, where's Ben?
Where's Ben? I'm here with the red mic.
Are we good? So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question, you can line up over there. If you have any hesitation by asking a question, go up to Sandy, she will write it down and I will read it. I've got here the first question for this gentleman.
Hello, my fellow Albertans. My question for Alberta is, do you understand the gravity of this? Do you understand that this is basically just about the same as the beginnings of North and South Korea? Do you understand that? Like myself being of Korean descent. So, yes, do you understand the gravity of this? This is, you can now have your own military. You can now have diplomatic missions. You can basically do trade and all sorts of different things. You can talk to Northern BC. You can get Saskatchewan involved. You can get all the right people involved. This is absolutely humongous. You have no idea. And the blood that you guys have that's in you, you're about to start a new country. That means that when you start a new country, you have to have the definitive of who you are, who your identity is. Because on the world stage, you're going to be the Republic of Alberta. What that means is you're right next to the United States. You're right next to all the other countries that are trading their oil as well. So those things have to be clearly defined. And so
I have to interrupt you. Sorry, we have to get questions, and what you're saying is great, and I would probably better have you as a speaker. But if you have a question, let's get the question over with, and then we'll move on after.
I left my email over there, and the question is like, I hope you guys understand just how important it is. Do you actually understand how important this is?
Thank you.
That is a fantastic question, and I did kind of touch on this a little bit. I absolutely do understand how consequential this is, which is why it's so important to talk about it. And like I said, this isn't This isn't a new thing. Since 1990, 38 countries have done this in some fashion or another. 80% have been peaceful. And I want to remind people, there's one very interesting example. In 1905, what else happened in 1905? Alberta and Saskatchewan were brought into confederation by an act of parliament. In 1905, Norway and Sweden actually had this conversation. And in that case, they also had to understand the gravity of it and what it meant. And they went through that peacefully. They're still great neighbors to this day. Many other countries have done the same thing. I don't see why we couldn't, but for sure that is important to remember.
Yes, Alan Cope is my name. Now, one of the questions I have is, I think that all of us need to know this answer. What becomes of our money? That's one question. Secondly is, we have 439 kilometers of border. What becomes of the border? How do we take a look after that? So I think those are important things that we need to know. Like what becomes of our money, and the other thing is what becomes of our pensions and our health care system. And that's what I would like them to answer for, I think, for everybody here. Thank you very much.
We can start with the pension. Your Canada pension and your OAS are contractual obligations by the Canadian government. You don't have to live in Canada to collect those. It's yours and always will be unless we have a provincial government smart enough to create our own pension plan so that we can increase our pensions or reduce our contributions or a combination of both. As far as money is concerned, we could use the U.S. dollar, a lot of countries do, but we would use that in the interim until we sorted out how to have our own currency and what would back it. The idea of having a fiat currency without backing, I think, is offensive to most of us. We don't want a situation to exist in Alberta that exists in Canada, that every time they decide they want more money, they just print it, which means every dollar in your pocket becomes worth less. We don't want that. We want our dollar to be backed by something. It could be backed by agriculture, oil, gas, whatever, but it needs to be backed. What else was there?
A question about the border.
Oh, the borders. Well, we have a rat patrol out there right now that keeps all the rats out of Alberta. No, I think they could be persuaded to keep out other people that we didn't want to. That's all I have to say.
I'm glad that you brought up those things because there's a lot of questions very similar to that. What are we going to do about this? What if that? How are we going to manage this? And the answer actually comes with a question when I give it. The question I have for you now, of all of the federally managed portfolios that affect Alberta, how do we deal with it now? If you, like me, were appalled when our Canadian government poured out Canadian whiskey talking about trade with the United States after the United States asked us to do better with our border. As an Albertan, if you don't like how our border security is, how do we deal with it? We don't really do anything, right? We can elect MPs and they can go to Parliament and say, hey, we want our borders more strongly defended, whatever, but it doesn't matter. We don't have control of those things right now. Some of the other things, like you mentioned, healthcare, pensions. Pension is a provincial jurisdiction, by the way. We currently manage healthcare, and things like that. That doesn't really change. We still manage it and our voices still matter. But what I'm more interested in is the things that we don't currently have control over right now that we would gain control of. That's exciting to me for the first time in Alberta's history, especially when it comes to monetary policy. As an Albertan, I was absolutely floored when I found out that our federal government doubled our money and halved its value. That bothered me. As an Albertan, it bothers me that I have to wonder if my savings are going to have the buying power in 10 years that they do today, because I know that they had double the buying power 20 years ago. You know, these are things that we have never been able to control, but we have the opportunity to do better. Now, the specifics on that's your guys' ideas. It's not me. I can tell you that I think we should adopt the US dollar immediately, use that so we can have international trade, all of those good things, and then develop our own currency backed by a hard asset. That's my idea. But in the end, it comes down to Albertans deciding, for the first time in Alberta's history, how we're going to manage these things that we currently don't. And like I said before, when the people who reap the benefits or suffer the consequences of the policy decisions are making the decisions inevitably get better.
So if you see our 4 speakers sitting over here, and I think they're way too comfortable, they're not even sweating, so bring your hardest questions over here. Sir, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jeff. This is more of an opinion/question. On October 5th, Quebec will have their provincial election, and it's expected that Jean-Pierre Plamondon and the Parti Québécois will win in a landslide, and they're expecting another referendum in that province. All power to them. But the thing is, Ottawa, as usual, like it did in 1980, 1995, will provide more goodies for Quebec, and I think it's imperative for us as Albertans that we vote for option 2 on October 19th, because nothing will never, ever change. And I just want to ask that gentleman there that just asked the first question, Keith Wilson and the Alberta Transition Council will be releasing a white paper in the next few weeks that will address the most frequent asked questions about pensions, borders, military, everything that's going to be revealed in the next couple of weeks. Thank you.
Well, the only thing that, yes, with the PQ coming in power, I believe it will change the scope of what we could do, because Quebecers will be allied in whatever other province that want to be sovereign wants to be. And I believe we have to stop seeing them as enemies, because they cost us a lot, because no Quebecer in Quebec knows anything about equalization. They don't care, they don't know, they prefer sovereignty than money. So I believe my wish, and by the way, with the PQ coming back, Plamondon already said that, told that he won't do a referendum year 1 because they want to stop. No, they are still under the Trump derangement syndrome across the province, and they won't do anything until Trump is in power. That he affirmed that. So I believe, though, that we have a chance, we have an opportunity, and I believe we had an opportunity. You had an opportunity when I was in Quebec in '95 for the reform to join the bloc and have stuff change. But at the time, the leader of the reform wanted to be prime minister instead of just working for Western Canada, like most Western politicians. And I believe this time we can still use the fact that Quebec will have an independence party back in power to join the forces and maybe have a referendum. The final question, we could ask it, same question, same day, Quebec, Alberta. Why not?
I think that's great. I'd like to make one observation here. The federal government's response to the Supreme Court reference on secession for provinces was to pass a document called the Clarity Act. The Clarity Act has, I think, 7 distinct steps that are primarily designed to make it more difficult for a province to become independent. Does anybody here know what Quebec's response to the Clarity Act was?
Yeah, so the Clarity Act was passed at the Commons on a Monday afternoon, and the Tuesday morning special session in the Quebec legislature, they passed a legislation saying 2 things. We will not, absolutely not, use the Clarity Act in any circumstance on the province in Quebec. And secondly, any referendum in Quebec will be instantly binding and effective at the time of vote. So Quebec absolutely just said, no what, Clarity Act, we will not obey by the Clarity Act if ever we need to go there.
I've come to admire Quebec a lot.
Well, just like you all saw our King Charles, the King of Canada, Charles III, coming to the speech throne, which is his throne, which is his government. No, so he has the right to do that. And when he did that, at the same time he was giving the speech throne, Quebec was in session, and there was an unanimous vote in the Quebec legislature. The five parties sitting there, all voted to kick the crown out. And what they've done, they passed a law. The law is two-step. First, they said we do not recognize any authority of King Charles III or any crown over the territory of Quebec. Law number two is that for now on, the lieutenant governor, we won't have royal assent anymore. The lieutenant governor will be a clerk to report what we voted in our chamber and to report to Ottawa. And after that, they've put two things they've done. They sent a bailiff to give the law to the king hand to hand as it was getting out of his speech. And secondly, they put a for sale sign in front of the lieutenant governor's house. So
there's a question here that kind of goes along with that, and I'll just ask it right now. The question is, how does the independence movement or the independence plan on getting out from under British control?
you just do it.
Yeah, and I want to mention something about Quebec saying that the lieutenant governor has no authority anymore. We're not giving royal assent. Did you know that that's completely constitutional? Our Constitution specifically says that every law that we have in Canada as a self-governing nation has to be passed in our legislature.
That's right.
It does not say that we debate and advise and then have that send it for royal assent and it's passed by a monarch. We're supposed to be doing that. Quebec is doing exactly what the Constitution demands, and no other province even considers it, which just blows my mind.
My name is Joseph. So to continue with that, what was just said, a lot of people, I'm going around Edmonton and towns around asking questions with regard to the independence of Alberta. And the majority of people that I talk to, they are very leery. They don't like the separation part. And so, but when I talk to them about that separation will not occur, it will not happen. Independent Alberta becoming a republic will happen. And after Alberta becomes a republic, then the rest of Canada, there will be all republics, and Canada will be the United Republics of Canada, one nation under God. If we bring the message to people that we are not trying to separate or break the country, we will win the referendum 80 or 90%. Easily. So we have to inform people, and we have to get away from the word separation, because it's not going to be a separation.
Well, my opinion on that is very clear. I am not a separatist because I believe that our constitution is already fashioned that way. It's a question of doing it. And right now, you know, like we're all like elbows up against Trump and all these tariffs. Do you know that there's more tariff between provinces and territories than with any other countries outside of Canada? So we're already acting as different countries. The problem is that we decided that everything can be managed by headquarters by choice. So Ottawa, it's a choice to let them administer what we have. Even the taxation, when Duplessis put this taxation in 1954, for 3 years, Quebecers paid twice tax, two times the same tax, because the federal refused to stop collecting. But because Duplessis was a local premier, he won over the feds, and they had to backtrack, and they had to go back in their hole, because they said no, we will keep on taxing, and if you keep on taxing, we make sure that our people knows that it's you who's the double taxation, not me. And they just assert their right. And this is really what needs to happen, I believe. Whether or not, you know what, we can have sovereignty without separation, but we cannot separation without sovereignty. So let's aim for sovereignty.
Well, that makes sense to me. One of the things I'd like to point out about your observation there is that a careful reading of the BNA and any subsequent addition to the Constitution of Canada is very, very clear. We are a confederation, not a federation. A confederation is a loose association of independent states.
Yes.
We are supposed to be independent now.
Yes.
The Canada, by our Constitution, is an association of equals. The federal government is equal to the governments of the provinces with different areas of responsibility. Unfortunately, what's happened over the last 100 years is the federal government has decided they're in charge. We have to assert, like Quebec did. When we went to a meeting in Red Deer where Premier Smith was there having a town hall, I pointed out to Premier Smith that, like my friend Benoit says, is sovereignty cannot be asked for. Sovereignty is not asked for. It's not begged for. Sovereignty is seized. It's taken. We need to do that.
Yes. I would like to add to that because Scott brought out, are we under the monarchy? We are no longer under the monarchy because in 1931 there was an act that was called the Act of Westminster. Upon that act, one out of the Commonwealth nation became a republic, the Republic of Ireland. So it's already done. Alberta can become a republic, independent, and then the rest of Canada will join Alberta independently, everybody being a republic. And we finally could be a nation under God, the United Republics of Canada. So it's already done. We don't have to do much. It's already done.
That's really interesting you bring that up. There's a man named Elmer Knudsen that was actually talking about this in the early 80s, and he formed a political party called WestFed. And his thing was, hey, we're already like this, we just need to affirm it and do it. So yeah, there is some validity to that. I want to speak to your comment about people being leery of it. I get it. 100%. How many people in this room actually trust a talking head politician that tells you something? Zero. Zero. No, sir, I think you heard my question wrong. I get why people are leery with this conversation. It's a big topic. We've been very politically apathetic, and we haven't really done our due diligence in learning these things. I learn new things every time Ben speaks about Quebec. I do. And these are things that we should know as Canadians. So when these things come up and we start having the conversations, it's scary because we don't know. Do you know how we fix that? We talk about it. And we listen to people like Ben, and we challenge the ideas, and we go home, and we fact check, and then we can start to have the conversations. And once you learn these things, the conversations get much less scary, and they even get kind of fun, because it is fun to learn about this stuff. Yeah.
My name is Vic. My question comes after a little bit of information ahead of time. I see the independence movement as focusing on symptoms rather than the agenda behind it. Everybody keeps saying that Trudeau and Carney are ignorant and don't know what they're doing. That's the opposite of the truth, because they know very well what they're doing. This started openly back with Pierre Elliott when he started doing things to destroy Canada, especially to destroy the middle class. And you look now, every law that they're passing, or a lot of them that they're passing, the tanker ban, the cap on the carbon, all of these things are designed to destroy the economy. Carney didn't listen to Trudeau when he gave Canada 3 options. And if you don't follow those 3 options, I'm going to put on tariffs. Well, all they heard was the word tariffs, and they ran with that. They haven't done anything to close the border, to deal with the fentanyl, or to improve their army. It's all hate Trump because he's mean and evil. And the whole thing is falling into play really well for their agenda, because at least half of the cabinet in Parliament right now, and with Trudeau, were graduates of the World Leaders Program for the World Economic Forum. And they've been doing exactly what they've been dictated to, or at least what they've been taught in those classes that they graduated. And the scary part is that we're being played by our own leader here. Danielle Smith, as far as I know, is also a graduate of that Klaus Schwab program. In fact, from what I've been able to discern, she's actually been a board member on his board for 2 or 3 years. I don't know if she is at this time, but that certainly doesn't encourage any kind of trust on my part. Basically, I see her playing the good cop, bad cop.
I have to interrupt you just for a moment, just because we have questions. But
my question.
The question, yeah.
My question is, why are we focusing on those symptoms, the different laws and things like that, when we need to be looking at the agenda, which is to turn Canada into a communist country? Because once we become communist and they take over, sovereignty within Canada doesn't mean a thing.
Okay, I understand the question. Here's the answer. We don't just focus on the symptoms. So very often we go much deeper into the systemic issue that allows these things to happen. So the problem that we're having is that we have global, unelected, unaccountable people that are coming up with policy, and then our politicians are going to them thinking they're so cool for going to these events, bringing this policy back to Canada and imposing on us. It's not stuff that we ask for. It's not things that we need. It's coming from somewhere else. And you might call me a conspiracy theorist for this, but if you look and you see some of these policies and how they go around, they're going around the world, it's the same here as it is there. It's the same 30-30-30 here as it is in Holland. Why? Is it because the people of the Netherlands asked for it and the people of Canada asked for exactly the same thing? No. It's because the talking point came from somewhere else. Now, this is why sovereignty is important, and why I believe that Alberta doesn't just need to follow the letter of the Constitution, but actually needs to withdraw and become its own sovereign nation. Because in that way, we can prevent those types of things. Now, you might argue that we can do that under the current Constitution. But the problem is, our federal government, even conservative governments, and maybe you're not a conservative, maybe you are, but a conservative government brought in the Paris Climate Accord, which was the first little trip on the slippery slope of climate alarmism, right? And what did Alberta do? We had to go along for the ride. We fought it in court. We pushed back against it for decades. Decades, still not changing anything. Some of the stuff we won after 15 years, but for that 15 years, we suffered the consequence. So regardless of those other parts of that, who's a WEF and who isn't, at the core of it is Alberta, I believe, must have a constitution that's written by the people, that protects the people, and gives the government their boundaries. Did you know that the Constitution that we have right now was not written by Canadians? Did you know that? It was written in England with the Crown's representative and some of our leaders of the day, and it was passed in British Parliament and imposed on Canada. What I'm suggesting is that we flip the script. And instead of a government telling us how we must behave and that we need to be peaceful and orderly and have good government, I believe that it should be the people finally taking control and saying, no, We do not consent to being governed that way. We only consent to be governed this way. And if you want to govern us, this is our Constitution. That's the difference. And that's what I'm advocating for. And once we do that, all of those other unelected, unaccountable people from across the world that want to tell us that we need to eat the bugs, they can just pound sand.
Can I talk on this one?
Yeah.
I just want to address the comment he made about how this started to change under Pierre Trudeau, and that's 100% true. I have another talk about that altogether. Like, we talked to a lot of people who love Canada, and that's why they don't want Alberta to separate, because Canada was a great country. Canada was a great country. For 100 years, Canada was one of the most magnificent countries in the world, and it changed. Why did it change? Pierre Trudeau is the single biggest reason why. Pierre Trudeau came in as a prime minister with an agenda to make us into a socialist country. Now, he was the one who unloaded on Alberta in the 1970s and 80s with his policies against Alberta's energy industry. And the way he attacked Alberta in the 1970s and 80s is unprecedented in Canadian history. No other province in Canadian history has been attacked by the federal government the way Trudeau attacked Alberta in the 70s and 80s. But more importantly than that was the way he changed the Constitution. He fundamentally changed our Constitution. Now, the Constitution is the fundamental document of a country. When you change the Constitution, you change the country. Pierre Trudeau gave us a different country. And actually, Ted Byfield, if you're familiar with him from Alberta Report, he wrote at that time in the 1980s that, with John A. Macdonald gave us old Canada, and Pierre Trudeau is giving us new Canada with a constitution that's very different from the previous one. And, Trudeau was promoting his Charter of Rights and Freedoms to give us our rights and freedoms. But do we have more freedoms with that? Or did we have more freedoms before? And if you study our history, you'll see we had more freedom before the Charter of Rights and Freedoms was brought in. Anyway, I just wanted to agree and emphasize that guy's point. Canada was a great country until Pierre Trudeau came around, and the only way we can solve the problems we had when he's changed the Constitution is to create our own Constitution as an independent Alberta.
Hear, hear. Just to add to that a little bit from a totally different perspective, my wife gave me a quote this morning from an actual quote from our Prime Minister, Mr. Carney, where I can't give you the exact quote, so I'm not going to put quotes behind it in front of it. But what he said was, Europe is going to institute the New World Order, and we will go with Europe. So if you think things are bad now in Alberta, just wait. In Alberta, we do something like, 88% of our trade goes north-south, doesn't it? 88% of our trade. And our Prime Minister just announced that he wants to go away from the market that we send 88% of our trade and receive 88% of our goods from, and tie us to Europe. If you think the economy is bad now, if you think the price of groceries is bad now, you wait till he's finished. I call his company Crookfield, not Brookfield. And I call it that for a reason. Do you know that Crookfield is wagering against Canada? They are shorting the Canadian dollar. So are many other major companies, property companies in the world. They're shorting Canada. You know what that means? They're betting against Canada. They're betting that we are going to be worse off down the road than we are now. And if we are, and they all assume we're going to be, including Crookfield, we will be even more broke than we are now. So we need to. Chris is an advocate of choice. He believes that we should be in charge of our own destiny. I 110% agree with him, and any thinking person should feel the same way. We need to create an environment in this beautiful province that we've traveled from north to south and east to west in, talking to people, that it's beautiful. It's incredible, and we have resources that are just the envy of the rest of the countries of the world. We need to preserve that. And the only way we can preserve that is with leverage, and we don't have any. And the beginning to leverage for us, for you, for your children, for your family, for your friends, is this October 19th referendum. That's just the beginning. So my opinion is, like Chris, I believe independence for Alberta is necessary and inevitable. I'm just hoping inevitable happens in my lifetime, and I'm getting pretty long in the tooth.
Yes, good evening. Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your thoughts this evening. And my friend Michael, and I was glad to meet Ben tonight. And I saw two views here tonight, and I'm still, looking at my options right now. And I agree, the status quo is not acceptable. This is only round one, a trial referendum. Get ready, and I don't think Alberta's quite ready to grasp this. I want to say one thing, a big elephant in the province right now. There's a leadership fractions in this movement, and some want to fire the Premier and hijack the UCP. I think that's political suicide, and you're going to give the government to the NDP. Win, lose, or draw in round one, you need a stable government and a good Premier. God help us. Amen. Thank you.
I'd kind of like to respond a little bit to that. I agree wholeheartedly that we need a stable government and a good Premier, and we don't have that. You may all love Danielle Smith. I don't know. I have a lot of respect for the things that she's done that are good for Alberta. Most of those things have been legislative. Legislation can be changed. Legislation is not permanent. Constitutions are permanent. Okay, so I'll say that. Now, as far as good government is concerned, or good representatives are concerned, we need, like I said before, to elect people in Alberta whose first priority is Albertans and Alberta's interests. We need to send representatives to Ottawa whose first priority is Alberta and Albertans. So I don't agree that we have a good Premier at the moment. I really don't. I'm not happy with her. Do you know that when we talk about this memorandum of understanding with respect to the new pipeline, we had to commit to $16 to $20 billion in expenditures for carbon capture to get it. The TMX pipeline right now is not making any money because the federal government the governments took it over and increased the cost of it by 4 or 5 times. When we put the new pipeline in, British Columbia has been promised money. The money that they've been promised will be treated as an operating cost and will come out of the proceeds of that pipeline before Alberta sees any profit. It's entirely possible that Alberta will see nothing from that pipeline and BC will profit from it. We need some change. In order to get change, we need leverage. In order for leverage, we have to have a Premier that says, like Quebec's Premier does, this is what we are entitled to under the Constitution. This is the way it's going to be. Like it or lump it. Take it to court if you want, but this is what we're doing.
Despite that, I do agree with the gentleman there that it's not time to, I believe, to create a putsch in the majority government in the province. I believe that we're a year away from an election. Like in politics in Quebec, when you don't agree with the leader, you go and you start your own stuff. That's what we've done. That's what the group. I was part of the Young Liberals in 1990, and Robert Bourassa decided to vote against us, and we're 2,000 youth that left the party at once. And then we turned around, we started our own stuff, named the ADQ. We won. I was in the first candidate. I was 23 years old. Our leader won at 24 years old. He was the only one elected, but we gathered 7% of the vote of the province in that first election. And that 7%, this is exactly what the PQ needed to win the yes. And this is why, when I said that question was written on my computer, that's why. Because Bouchard had no choice but to come and call us and say, hey guys, come and sit with us. Because without you, we won't win. And we say, okay, but you know what? We're not separatists, but let's sit together and see what we can do. And then the question in Quebec in 95 was that. It was not a referendum on separation. That's false. The 95 referendum was, do you give the mandate to the Premier to go negotiate with Ottawa, and if after 1 year of negotiation it doesn't work, then we separate. And this is why they call for the Clarity Act. Okay, and I believe that same question that we came up with in Quebec 30 years ago is still valid today here in this province in Alberta. And I believe that if we win, at the same time, I believe that we need to vote for option 2 on October 19, because we need to vote at least to commence that process that will lead us there. So I am not for status quo. I am not for Forever Canada. This is a situation that is unacceptable. But I'm not either to kick the leader of a party in majority right now, a year before the election either. And I'm not as well to divide that party at this point. For those who really don't agree, get out and start your own stuff.
I'm really glad you said that, Ben. How many people in this room were voters in the 90s? In 1990, were you made to feel like you were doing a disservice to your neighbors by voting reform? In early 2000, were you, mid 2000s, were you made to feel like you were doing a disservice to Alberta by voting Wild Rose? Something changed in Canada and in Alberta. And we went from being able to express ourselves and align ourselves politically with what we believed in to being told, you can't support that because if you do, we might end up with something worse. And now we're in a very precarious position. I watched as some candidates for a by-election were debating and trying to win people over. And one side was saying, we need to do these things for Alberta. We need to fix this, we need to fix that, great talking points, all the things Albertans want to hear. The other side said, you can't vote for that because it's important that we just beat the NDP. And I have this sinking feeling that our politicians have, again, here's that word, gaslit us to believe that we need to support them even though they don't support us because they tell us we have to be fearful of something else. Well, legislation is legislation. And we learned something very cool in the last 5 years, that if things get bad enough in Alberta, we can mobilize and we can, dare I say it, take back Alberta. Yeah. Do you remember that when we fired a premier? Yeah. People, if we want this change for Alberta, even if you don't want to be an independent nation, but you want something different than the status quo, you're going to have to grow a pair and start being a lot more bold than, and I should say we need to, and be a lot more bold in our decisions than we have been. Because if we keep voting out of fear for something, we're not going to gain anything. And this is a tricky thing to talk about. Every time I talk about this, I get hate mail. How dare you not support Danielle? How dare you trash her? I think she's fantastic. I do. I admire a lot of things she's done. She has done some things that other people don't have the courage to, and she stood there and taken the tomatoes and the rotten vegetables from the left when she did it. And I admire her for that. But now we're somewhere different. We're talking about Alberta sovereignty. If Danielle Smith tomorrow said, hey, we're going to do the things that Alberta needs to do to become sovereign, and she knows exactly what we need to do, it's in the Free Alberta strategy, she's talked dozens of hours with Ben, she knows what's in the firewall letter, and these are things that could be done in 6 months. If she would do those things, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you, because she would be pursuing the sovereignty that she tells you she's pursuing. Even though I respect and admire her, she is not pursuing the sovereignty that we need. The MOU isn't sovereignty, it's begging for scraps of confederation. And when people get this past their fear and start actually voting for the things they believe in, we will see those changes. But if we can't do that, we're not going to see it. Now, your comment about trying to get rid of a leader right now, that is completely preposterous. It's a waste of energy. And anybody telling you that you should use your networks and mobilize a movement to accomplish that political nonsense, you shouldn't listen to them. That's what I'll tell you. But when it comes to being bold with your voting, that needs to change.
And I just want to finish by the only organization that I know where everybody is 100% for the leader all the time. It's called a cult, not a political party. Okay?
Hi, my name is Chris, and I have a question about Danielle Smith. Be a little close. I don't want
It has to be
I don't
close,
want-
otherwise we can't hear you. I know it's weird.
Okay, so everyone saw the Orwellian thought police buses the Edmonton City Police put out, and they can only do that because Carney passed Communist Bill 9. But Daniel Smith said she's not going to enforce that in Alberta, right? So there's a lot of people that give her no room to make a move. They judge her on everything. But what do you think about her standing her ground on that?
Okay. Well, I believe that, and this is what sometimes I'm baffled by often our position, because you know what, constitutionally speaking, the administration of justice is provincial jurisdiction. So any province, like Quebec has its own civil code. You know that? It's not common law in Quebec. In Quebec, when you sue on civil, it's according to the Napoleon Code of 1802. This is what Quebec uses for all civil trial in their province, because they have the right to do it. So I believe that, again, she's demonstrating and she's showing that she knows that we do have sovereignty on the administration of justice. I pray for her to start using blanket sovereignty on every freaking thing that she knows that was sovereignty on. So, but I applaud her for doing that. At the same time, I believe that that she should expand that. No, I will talk of something else that I don't understand in the behavior of our government right now. Like okay, they say we won't apply Bill C9 in Alberta. Okay, bravo. No, but then we have that gun grab. She said we won't let anybody grab the guns. Well, okay, but if I have a pal and I have one registered weapon that is on that list, the federal government knows that I do own that weapon. So why don't she go a step further and said, I will now do provincial PAL, so that way you can get rid of your federal PAL and not be that's a missing step. No, there's always something missing. It's always like window dressing, and their drafts still come through the window. So that's my comment about that.
Hi, everybody. I'm BB. I've been asked to pass on a message. It's an announcement. It says that, I've lost where I put it. Nope, wrong Shane. It says, I hope the event in Spruce Grove goes well tonight. I'm hopeful there will be an announcement at some point that Team Alberta Independent Movement supporters are doing a parade in the Westlock float on Friday. Volunteers are needed to walk within the float and distribute flyers. If anybody is interested in doing that this Friday coming up, please see me at the back before you leave and give me your name and number, and I will forward it to Benita Patterson, who is out of Westlock. Thank you.
That sounds like fun.
Ladies and gentlemen, Let's Talk Alberta, we're having almost 20 speakers, like we have the 4 right now on stage, but we do this with more than 100, up to 200 volunteers, and one of our volunteers is Sandy. And people, if you've been afraid or hesitating to have your questions being answered, Sandy will do this for you right now.
Okay. I have about 5 questions from the audience, and I know our time is going. So
We have 5 minutes.
What? Okay. So Jasper suggested I just read them and then you answer. So first one is someone who was disturbed at some of the signage he saw and asked, why do we have to display signage that appears offensive and stoops to the level of the opposition? Question 2, how or will Agenda 2030 affect our referendum?
Sandy, let me get those 2 right now.
Yeah.
The first one with the signage, I think you're referring to the signage that said something about First Nations people. That is nothing. People express themselves individually, and unfortunately, it paints the entire movement. None of us here agree with that type of messaging. We're pursuing sovereignty, not personal attacks or attacks on one group or the other. And I would encourage people to be conscious of what they're displaying saying and how it reflects on what they're participating in. The second one, Agenda 2030, again, this is something that came from outside of Canada, from people that we didn't elect, aren't accountable to us, and they can take that and they can shove it where the sun don't shine. I do not believe that Canada or Alberta should be ushering in the New World Order. And 20 years ago, if I had said New World Order, you'd say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Now we have Mark Carney sitting in China saying that we will usher in the New World Order with China, and we will participate in the New World Order with Europe. This is not a joke, it's not a conspiracy, and if you continue to treat it as such, you'll find out very quickly that it's real.
Okay. Question 3, how will laws be created in a new and independent Alberta?
I'll get that one too, Sandy. Laws are created the same way as they are now. We elect people, they go to our legislature or whatever it is, and they debate things and they pass laws to our benefit. The difference in Alberta, a nation of Alberta, as to what we have now, all of the laws that are passed are people that we have the ability to affect and change, right? So if we don't like the laws, we elect somebody else, they fix the laws for us. Right now, we kind of can't do that on a federal level, but a new independent nation of Alberta could.
If we don't succeed in October, what do you think is going to happen to our property rights, our culture, and our morals in this province? I'll add the 5th one is, will the subjects of abortion and euthanasia ever be brought up in a new Alberta and discussed?
Well, two things about October 19. This is the end; it's the start. So Alberta 19 doesn't decide on anything. October 19. It's just a point in time that will lead us to keep on talking and bring something else, either yes or no. As for subject like abortion or MAID or other stuff, again, these are questions that can be dealt provincially. Already, the management of health is 100% provincial. So again, these are stuff that can be dealt with right now. So anyway, that's what I have to say.
On those two issues specifically, we don't speak on those issues because these are not political issues. These are societal issues. There are two schools of thought. I believe that human beings are created in the image of God with purpose and distinction, and we're meant to be here. I believe that life is sacred. I believe that everybody is valuable and that God loves you and you have a purpose. The other camp does not. Yeah. This is not a political thing. This is a spiritual thing. Yeah. If you're like me and you're concerned about these issues, there is one... The only way we fix those types of issues or change the way our politicians handle them is if we change our society. And that, just like politics, involves being open and honest with your conversations. How many people in this room have been told it's impolite to talk about religion and politics? These are two of the most important conversations we can have in our lives. Politics affects everything from before you're born to after you're dead, and religion affects your entire life and your eternity. Yeah. I would say these are very important things to consider. Now, we live in a society where it's impolite for somebody to stand on a stage and say, Jesus loves you, he's the one true king, and your salvation is available to him through grace alone. That is improper for me to say, but I'll say it because the question was brought up. If we have these conversations, we start to change the ways, and we share that good news with people, we start to change the way society acts and behaves and what they ask for. Right now, society is asking for death. They're asking for human beings to be considered less and not sacred. I think we can change that. That's separate from the political thing, and it comes down to individual conversations that we're each willing to have with our friends and neighbors about those types of things. And I think that we're going to take that last question.
If the majority of the people that are on the fence or that are against this are wondering, what's going to happen the day after, what's going to happen with our public health care, what's going to happen with our passports, for goodness sake, what's going to happen with our money, all of these things, my understanding is that we have a draft constitution. that the APP has come up with a draft constitution. Why are we not sharing that with these people, saying, look, we've already got this. This is how far we've come. We've got the idea of, we've talked with the United States. They said that they would let us use their money, rate dollar for dollar. Why are we not bringing these things up so that these people can make this decision?
Okay, so the reality is none of those things change. The only thing that a successful referendum on the question of Alberta independence, whether it's binding or not, changes is the conversation after, the things we start talking about after. Nothing changes until we decide or say how it's going to change. Nobody has got any type of agreements from the United States. They have had casual conversations asking if the United States may support an independent Alberta, to which the answer was, of course, we believe in democracy and free and self-determination, so yes. But aside from that, that's it. When it comes to the Constitution, there will be people telling you, this is what your Constitution is going to look like. They are liars. They don't know. Yeah. The Constitution that Alberta crafts will be with your involvement, with your conversation. We get to talk about those things. That's the reality. This is an opportunity for the first time in Alberta's history for us to decide these things. But we do it together. And it's not a leader telling you, it's not me telling you, it's you participating in probably the most amazing and biggest blessing that Albertans will have in their lifetimes.
Wonderful. I'm thinking we're done, but I want to make one observation here. When my friend Michael came up here, he looked at me and he said, "You're sitting on the far left." Now, I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, which side am I on? Which side is he on? All right, we got that settled. Thank you very much.
And just that thing about October 19, there's two words. The question is super long and confusing. There's two words that you need to highlight: stay or commence. So choose commence.
And that's our opinion.
That's why, yeah. Well, I don't want separation, and I still want to commence because this is that will commence the talk officially. So let's talk.
All right, thank you very much, folks. We're going to do the 10-second tidy. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but if you don't mind, if you could help us put the chairs away, that would be absolutely fantastic. If you didn't get your question answered, I'm going to wrap up the video stuff, and then we'll be available outside for a little bit of time. We can have some more conversations. And aside from that, let's talk Alberta.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this evening. Your speakers of tonight, Chris Scott, Michael Wagner, Ben Trudeau, and John Riel. Enjoy your evening. More information on Let's Talk Alberta and freedomcalendar.net.
While you guys are cleaning up, can you keep your eyes open for a big key ring? We seem to have misplaced the keys to the building. So if you could please keep your eyes open for the key ring.
So much.
Microphone. Okay, hear me. There we go. Well, thanks for hanging with us again, folks. This was Let's Talk Alberta in Spruce Grove. A little bit spicy, not too bad. We're going to be in, I think Grand Prairie is our next one on the 12th. So we will have the Let's Talk Alberta tour bus with us as well. And if you haven't seen it, there it is. This is one of the things, albeit a very major thing, that Let's Talk Alberta is doing to convey our message. Number one, that we want to talk about Alberta's future. And number two, that Alberta is worth talking about. If you like what we're doing and you want to see more of this and maybe perhaps chip in for the $1 per kilometer it costs to drive the stupid thing because we're paying $2 a liter for diesel, please consider donating to Let's Talk Alberta at letstalkalberta.com. You can find a you can find a donate button there, or you can send an e-transfer to letstalkalberta@gmail.com. Another thing I want to point out, this bus has some advertising space, so if you or somebody you know is a third-party advertiser that wants to buy advertising space on Let's Talk Alberta's bus, please get a hold of me at chris@letstalkalberta.com to discuss some advertising potential. And that goes for any of the third-party advertisers on any side of it. It doesn't matter. If Forever Canadian wants to advertise their advocacy on there, I will put the sticker on, but they got to pay us. So please consider supporting the work we're doing in that way, and look for the Let's Talk Alberta bus in your neighborhood. You're going to see it soon, I'm sure, because we're going to be all over the place. If you do see it, do us a favor, get a picture, take a selfie with it, post it on your social media, share it all over the place, tag Let's Talk Alberta in it, and let's really get people talking about Alberta. I'll say it again. Let's talk Alberta. Good night.